live and see if that'll work, but it doesn't matter.
Did you do what?
I had it set up for YouTube as well. So either one is okay. So, YouTube live and see if that'll work. All right, but it doesn't matter.
Did you do what?
I had it set up for YouTube as well. Wait a minute. Either one is. I got to mute.
Everything that we just said is just repeated.
No, none of that.
In an echo chamber.
There we go. Now.
That's better.
Yeah, I turned that off. Okay. Well, I just introduced myself. It's welcome to this edition of Full Court Press with Coach Jay. This is a very, 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 very special edition of this show because this is my college coach, the guy who recruited me and gave me a chance to play Division I basketball. I have Coach Felton on the line with me, and we're going to get started. Coach, I got a funny question to start out with. As when you got into coaching, what coach was it that gave you your first, butt whooping that made you realize, like, okay, this coaching thing is really for real?
Well, the first major college coach I worked for, my first Division I job, was at the University of Delaware, and I worked for a guy named Steve Steinwettle. And Coach Steinwettle, I was really naive and clueless when I first got into the business because I didn't even experience the business at a high level from a player's point of view because I wasn't one of these, highly recruited players that had a lot of interaction with major college coaches in the recruiting process. So I was about as green as you can get. I was only one year removed from college myself when I got my first Division I assistant coach's position. And for the first year or two, I was coaching some guys that were older than me. And Steve Steinwettle was a very demanding coach. He loved Bobby Knight. He was a guy that really, really studied and patterned himself after Coach Knight. And so, that was part of the dynamic is that, very intense, very demanding. So it was probably a good way to break in and learn how to carry yourself in this industry right out of the gate. And there were plenty of times where I was the subject of learning some lessons from my boss. And but I've always been a guy that I'm tough-skinned, and I don't let what people say, or especially how they say it, affect me very much. I have an ego, but not an ego that gets in the way of me doing my work and doing my job. So I coped well and just was grateful for the opportunity to learn the business at such a young age and with no experience to get me off to a quick start in this industry.
So with that, I'll lead into starting to talk about your coaching journey. Tell me about your first coaching job and how you got into the business and what made you get into coaching.
Yeah, well, like a lot of guys, a lot of kids, I grew up dreaming of playing professionally, playing in the NBA and making a life out of playing the game. And as I got further into my career as a player, especially when I got to the Division I level at Howard University, it started becoming pretty evident to me that playing professionally wasn't in my future. So I started thinking that coaching could be a great way to stay involved with the game I love. I mean, the game was my life growing up, and I saw that as an opportunity to stay in this game. And so I started thinking about being a coach when I was playing college basketball, although I didn't really know how to do it because, it wasn't like I was a high-level player that had, that was immersed in a lot of experiences in the industry. So even though I had an interest in it, once I graduated from Howard University, because I really didn't know, how to get into into the coaching game, I kind of came to the conclusion that the smart thing to do would be to go on and get a job in my field of study, which was radio, TV, and film production, which is what I did initially. I got a job in television, and unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, I can say now, 3 months into my first job, I got laid off, by the production company I was working with, because they were struggling financially. They were on their way to bankruptcy. So all of a sudden, right in the beginning of my professional career, I was sitting at home again with nothing to do and nothing but time on my hands. And so there was a coach named John Mappus. He coached against me in high school and in junior college. And he had always kind of stayed after me about coming to help him. But I never had time. Whenever he talked to me about, coming to help him, be a part of his staff, I never had the time to do it. So, when he called me in, late November or December, that first year out of college, for me, I didn't have the excuse of I didn't have any time to do it. So that was my first job. He hired me at Charles County Community College, just south of Washington, D.C., where I basically grew up. And so I took that job with him at Charles County Community College and made $1,600 that year. And then I was just really, really, really fortunate to get a full-time Division I assistant coaching position the following year at the University of Delaware. But that would have never happened had I not gotten that first opportunity at Charles County. And John Mappus, I'm just forever grateful to him to first of all be so persistent about getting me to come help him, and number two, giving me that opportunity.
So would he be one of your biggest influences in coaching, or if he was, and if you have more than one, who would it be?
Well, everybody influenced me along the way. I would have to say the biggest influence on me was Rick Barnes, who is now the head coach at Tennessee. Coach Barnes hired me at Providence College. I was at St. Joe's at the time working for John Griffin, who, even though I was with him for 1 year, he was a great influence on me too. But I was with Coach Barnes for the longest time of anyone in my career, and to work for Coach Barnes was really good from the standpoint of he was a head coach who believed in just letting his staff do their job and expecting them to do their job. So number one, so he turned over a lot of responsibility to you, and wasn't one of those coaches that looked over your shoulder to make sure you were doing your job or make sure that you were doing it precisely like he wanted. He gave you, he had the confidence to just let you do your job as you see fit. And he also wanted all of his coaches to be involved with every aspect of the program. He wasn't, especially during that time when he hired me, a lot of coaches, wanted their assistants just to recruit, just to bring in players, and that's all that mattered. And Coach Barnes was the opposite of that. He wanted his assistants to be head coaches in the making, and he wanted them to be involved with every aspect of the program. And so with him, I was not only with him for 6 years, but I was also afforded the opportunity to think like and behave like a head coach the whole time I was with him. So I probably learned more, I grew more under him as an assistant than anyone. And I was with him at two different schools, two very different schools. He went from a small Catholic league, small Catholic school, Providence College, trying to survive in back then the Big East was the real Big East. I mean, it was a powerfully, good conference. And then we went together. We left Providence together to go to Clemson, which was this big state university and another great league, the ACC. starting from scratch together, taking over a program that had hit rock bottom and, was involved, NCAA violations and, a depleted roster and all those things. So that experience with Coach Barnes, both at Providence, where we won a Big East championship, which is a very, very rare occasion at Providence, to starting, taking over a program that was in a deep hole in the ACC, and to be honest with you, Clemson just lacked, tradition, winning tradition of most all the programs in that league. That experience was clearly the richest experience I had as an assistant coach, and put me in a position where I was prepared and felt confident that I was prepared to be a head coach once I got the chance to be one at Western Kentucky.
Speaking of Western Kentucky, I thank you again for giving me that opportunity to play. Lord knows my freshman year was fun, but it was also hard because we got some funny stories. We got some funny stories for that, but I ain't gonna share that with the world. I'm gonna keep that between us.
Well, I will say this. The freshman year for 99.9% of freshmen is always very, very, very difficult. Probably one of the toughest experiences a guy will go through in his entire life is their freshman year as a major college student athlete. It's just, except for just a handful of freaks who, kind of where the game just comes, so easy to them that it isn't as hard. These one and done types. But for the rest of us, and guys like you, it is the most daunting time and experience that you'll ever go through. And I'll say this, it's surprisingly tough, because you're talking about star players coming out of high school that expect to just hit the ground running and just do the same things that they could in high school. And like I said, except for that, those handful of freaks out there, that's just not the case. It's literally starting all over, and the game that used to be so easy and so joyful all of a sudden becomes difficult and hard and taxing in every way. Not to mention the experience of figuring out how to be a successful student at the college level at the same time. So it's really hard for everyone. And what happens is, and you figured it out. I can especially say that you figured it out because I think it slams you in the face. When you got to Western Kentucky, as hard as any freshman. But what you did is you were tough enough and smart enough to just stick through. Tough it out and figure it out. And you also had good support from home. Your father was, telling you all the right things in terms of how to be patient and persistent and just fight through the adversity and it'll all work out. So you're a great success story. I'll be honest with you, it's harder and harder on guys like you to have that same kind of experience now because everybody, the attitude now is just to cut and run and think that it's easier or better somewhere else. And that's why, this year we'll probably have upwards of 1,500 transfers in 1 year. It was well over 1,100 last year, and it'll just grow exponentially every year. And it's really a shame. It's too bad because that approach has just sabotaged so many careers, so many basketball careers, but Jamal, you were tough enough to stick through it and put up with what I'm sure you thought for me was crazy at the time, but it put you in a position to be a very, very productive player who ended up having a great college career.
Yes, sir. And that freshman year was vital to the rest of my years in college playing, but also that group of seniors, David Boyden, Nate Williams, and then you had the upperclassmen of Philip Vidnoff and Mike Wells. They all were very instrumental in making sure us freshmen were taken care of. But just speaking of Western.
Can I say something?
Oh, yeah.
You're absolutely right, because without that leadership that we had within the ranks of our program, you might not have succeeded so well. Because if it was just me in your ear and just my voice that you were hearing, without having the benefit of perspective from your teammates who had already gone through it and understood what it was all about and understood why we worked so hard and all those things. If you didn't have that kind of leadership from within your teammates, who knows? But you did. We were, by the time you got to Western Kentucky, we were an established program. Actually, we were an established championship program. We were a dominant program. And, what those seniors that you mentioned had gone through to get us there, that was the kind of experience they could share with you and say, hey, young fella, just be tough. Just listen with your ears wide open, your eyes wide open. And not only will you get through these tough times, but you'll prosper from these tough times, just like we have. And so you're right. I tell you what, I've had a chance to be a part of a lot of championship teams, more than I deserve as a head coach. And one thing that I can tell you consistently ran through all of them was outstanding leadership from within the ranks of the players. And you hit the nail on the head when you referred to that, Jamal.
Yeah, that was very big because they were there, especially David, because he was my roommate, and we still talk. Like we check in, once or twice every couple of weeks, just to make sure we're all right. But he was very instrumental to me because him and Nate both, because they used to let me know that, hey, we were here when it was the beginning, and we were just trying, like we were trying to win games, and he's like, you're coming in. Yes, it's going to be harder because we're a championship team. We have a target on our back. Nobody really wants to play us, and then when they want to play us, we're getting everybody's best game. And he was like, You're getting the good end of it. He said it's going to be tough because the expectations is high, and they walked me through that. So that leadership, again, it was very important and very instrumental to help me with that year. Because I tell you, I don't know if I ever told you, but that first 6 to 8 weeks, Coach, when I was going from being a post player to just being a strictly wing player, I thought I'd forget to play basketball. I'm telling you, them 6 to 8 weeks was probably the hardest in my life. And then we played the Globetrotters, and I played all of 53 seconds. I was like,
in an exhibition game.
I was like, this is not it.
Right.
Because
because my ass off, and then in the exhibition game, I only mustered 53 seconds.
53 seconds. I'll never forget.
Today's game with today's parents, you would have probably transferred right then.
Right. I was like, this is not it. I got to do something different to be successful. And And it got better. Like you said, and one thing that I think that you told me definitely at the end of the year was there was a point in that season, and I've told this story to people before, there was a point in that season that I used to tell them, and I told my kids somewhat of it. I was like, Coach Felton wouldn't let me come off the court and practice. I said I was always on the team with no subs. I was at a 3 or at a 4. And I never understood why until he told me after the fact. He said, I needed you in shape because you were making an impact on the game, and it was changing when you were coming off the bench. The energy level would change. And that was like I didn't see it then, because my whole thing was I used to go to Coach Herman and Coach Turner. Why am I practicing at the 3 if I'm never going to play at the 3 in the game? And in the first game of the tournament, Mike Wells is in foul trouble. Anthony's in foul trouble, and it's just Phillip, I think. It's either Phillip or Mike. One of them wasn't in foul trouble. And then you're looking down the bench like, I can see that look like, do I play a freshman that's been playing, or do I play a freshman that hasn't been playing? Because it's all I got to hey, you got to go. And I'm like, what, me? 3? Oh, okay, cool. It was just like, because I was frustrated, but then I was like, you know what? I'm getting to play, so I'm not going to complain. We're winning games. We had that little, we had to have our little powwow session, but it was good. That was like that was probably my best year in school. I mean, not only because we won championship, regular season, and conference, and got to the tournament, but it was just that year for me was needed as a freshman because it helped me grow up and be. When I got to Cal State Fullerton, it helped me be the leader. I wasn't the vocal leader there, but I was a leader by example because hey, you taught us to play hard. You taught us to box out. You taught us to talk on defense and all that stuff. So all that became influential. But I was just
you had a real adventure. For those listeners who don't know, I recruited you, even though I'm trying to remember, Jamal. You might remember better than I, but I definitely saw you as a wing player. Even though I'm not sure you played a ton of wing in high school, but I saw you as a wing player. You were a player that I thought could make that transition, and we recruited you to be a wing. I mean, with no reservation. And then, if you remember, we lost a bunch of front court players before the season even got started. We were going to be possibly the biggest team in the country that year to becoming, all of a sudden, we became one of the smallest teams in the country because of injuries to, one left. Michael Doe left during the summer, right? He didn't even make it through the summer. Then we lost Chris, and then we played Arizona.
Yep.
That was your year, right? We played Arizona, number one team in the country in the first game of the season.
Right.
And our starting forward, Tador, blew out his knee in like the opening minutes of the game. So our team went through a dramatic transformation. So all of a sudden now, if you were basically forced into having to play primarily the four, and that's a great example because we weren't dishonest with you when we were recruiting you. We really legitimately had every design on you being a three for us, but because of the turn of events, you ended up having to help us at the four instead. And so that was just one more thing that you had to endure to figure your way through and have enough belief to say that, hey, you didn't sit there and say, I'm getting screwed. You might have thought it a couple of times, but you never let it impact your willingness to stay with it and keep after it. And so, yeah, you ended up playing the four all season. Again, not because that was our plan, but because it was just out of necessity, and you persevered through that also.
Yeah. That made me a man too, because we had to play Hector Romero, James Moore, and it was a lot of forwards that we had to guard that were good. But I got to tell this one story, and then I'll ask the question that I want to get to. I remember we were playing New Mexico State at home in the tournament because we lost to them at their place, and I had James Moore, and I kept hitting him and kept hitting him and kept hitting him, and then that one time he saw me coming and he turned around and went the other way. I'll never forget how excited you were to see that, because it was like he finally got it, and now the guy's not coming. He sees what I've always said would happen. I'll never forget. That was so funny. And kids, I tell that story in practice at some point in time. The kids started laughing. I'm like, no, I was really hitting him. And he saw me coming to box out, and he turned and went the other way. I was like, that was
exactly. That's something that I preach to players all the time. Number one, James Moore was a bad boy. Good Lord, that dude could play 6'9", kind of a combo forward, and just, oh man, could he score. So anyway, we always preach to our guys, as you know, that, we want to be the fiercest, most physical team in the game. We want to do it to a level that we are intimidating. And we talk about that. Remember, we used to tell you guys that, we were in a race to see who could get the first foul, who could pick up the first foul on a blockout to start games, because we wanted to not only dominate the glass, but we wanted to send a message that you're wasting your time thinking you're going to come and get a offensive rebound against us. So, we hit you however we had to hit you to take your aggression away. And what you just described is like that's exactly what we were looking for. We were looking to soften soften our opponent up and make them not only keep them off the glass, but end up making our job. And we used to tell you guys, the job will get easier. You know, if you hit them and you hit them harder than they hit you, then at some point they're going to stop coming, and the game will become easier for us. And, you know, other than scoring and stopping people from scoring, you know, rebounding was the next most important factor in the game for us. And we had great rebounding teams.
Yeah, especially that year. That same game, I remember I got about 3 or 4 offensive rebounds in a row off the free throw line because of the simple concept of sprint. And I forget what the other guy was supposed to do. And I came out the game. I ended up having I had 4 offensive rebounds, and the excitement on your face again was like, man, you're doing exactly what. And I was just like, I got it. When I looked at you, I was like, I'm just doing what you told me to do. And you were excited. You was like, I know, that's right. And I was like, It was good. But that whole tournament run was good for us. Like, it was just great to see where we came from in the beginning of the year with Tador and so many injuries and so many people, so many things happening to, you know, we having that little losing streak. And then we had to have our little come to Jesus meeting. And then we went on this incredible streak of not losing. It was great. Like, it was great for us.
Yeah. Do you remember that meeting? Do you remember where it was?
It was at Detroit Mercy after Willie Green had given us like 40.
That's right. We got slaughtered at Detroit. And you know, we were in a tough place. I mean, our roster had been decimated before the season even got going. We were struggling with it, and that Detroit loss was like the cap on. What's my man's name that lit us up for like 40? What was his name?
Willie Green, who played in the NBA.
Willie Green, yeah, Willie Green had a great NBA career. Played about 14 years in the league, but he lit us up, and we ended up. Do you remember? It was a nice sunny day, afternoon game when we played, and that team meeting. We were in there so long. First of all, the janitor gave up on us. He was like, "Okay, I'm just going to leave y'all here." And do you remember when we came out, the place was covered in snow?
Yeah, because we played at like 2 in the afternoon. I think the game was over by 4, and we were still in that meeting. I don't think we walked out of that meeting till like 9:30.
That's right.
We were in there forever.
Hey, we had a lot to talk about, but I think we won our next 26 games.
Yeah, we went on a run, but it was because at that point we were losing all of our road games. We were winning home games. And I think we were like 1 game above 500, but we were negative in the rebounding column. And you challenged us to rebounding thing because I remember after the Christmas break, you came in with that wig on and started dancing. That was funny because we had became.
I had what? What happened? What happened?
Because you told us, you said as soon as we got our rebounding margin in the positives, because we were in the negative.
Yeah.
You said I will dance for you guys, and we were sitting in practice. We were in the locker room because 10 minutes early is on time, and it was on time. We're like, Coach usually here. Then here comes his music. All the other coaches are there. We don't know where Coach is. And here comes his music, and here you come with your afro and the dance box. And we all and you tried to get all us to dance. It was like the funniest thing ever. It was
throwing down to some P-Funk, I'm sure.
P-Funk, we know it. George Clinton had to be that because that's your favorite group. For those that are listening, Coach Felton loves George Clinton and P-Funk, guys.
That's right.
You can always find him listening to that. But that meeting, I think, was vital to our season because you also gave us that moment to say, this is what we think of the staff. This is what we think of each other. And we all had to be mature enough not to take it personal, but to understand. And I think one of the things that really also that was said by David, he was like, Coach, when people wasn't on the white line or people didn't box out, you would take them out. It didn't matter what was going on. And when people started realizing they were going to come out, because I remember, again, I checked into a game and I didn't get to the white line. Next sub, I just came running to the bench because now we were able to hold each other accountable for everything. And we knew if we wanted to be a championship team, we had to, not only did y'all have to hold us accountable, but we had to hold each other accountable for ourselves. And that's where that leadership kicked in. And of course, we won about 20 games in a row. And and got to the tournament and should have won that first
Yeah,
round.
we didn't lose another game until the NCAA tournament.
Right. Yeah,
Yep.
we lost.
It was 20-something. Yeah.
We lost to Illinois by like 3 or 4, something like that, 5.
Yeah. Great game, and of all people, Darren Williams hit a sideline 3 to beat us, and he was a non-shooter at that time.
Right, and it was like, and D. Brown was like so fast. That was like the fastest person I ever seen with a ball besides Raymond Felton. It was great.
Yeah, they had a great team. They had about 7 NBA players on that team.
Yep, Brian Cook dunked on me in that game. Blocked the shot. That was the highlight of my game. I blocked the shot, but he dunked on me about 2 plays later. It was good though. He was soft though.
Well, what you're speaking to, I mean, we had championship character. We had championship character on that team, in that program, and again, I called that meeting, and we were in there a long time, but it doesn't happen without great leadership from within the players, and that's what we had. David Boyden led the way, but he wasn't the only one. We because the league was licking their chops because they were tired of losing to us, and they thought their moment had come to knock us off the pedestal. And because of the kind of character you guys, the competitive character you guys had, we turned into it into another great season, another couple of championships, and another NCAA tournament appearance.
And your 100th win as a coach.
That happened that year?
That was the championship game when we beat Middle Tennessee. That was your 100th
how about
win.
that?
Yep.
How about that? Yeah.
I won't forget that because I was holding the ball and one threw it in the air before we started all the celebrations.
How about that? Yeah. Good times. Good times.
Definitely was. So when you took over Western Kentucky, because I'm gonna talk about that because that's so familiar to me. In building culture, what was your primary focus outside of everybody knows you want to win a national championship, you want to win a conference championship, all of that, but going into a program that was kind of in the dumps, not really in the dumps, but not really in the dumps, but just a losing program that you were going to have to turn around and try to build it into a championship program, in which you did. What was your focus and efforts on that, and what were you looking for in your recruits at the same time?
Yeah, well, number one, it does start in recruiting. You have to find people who have the character makeup to, even if they don't understand when you get them what it means to, what it takes to become a champion, they do at least have the level of intelligence and the level of heart, competitive spirit and heart to learn what it takes to become a champion. So that's where it starts. And we always talked about all the tough things that we took pride in doing on a daily basis in order to be champions. So we wanted guys to hear it up front, and we wanted them to start thinking about, being champions from starting with the first phone conversation we'd ever have with the recruit. And then in the program, having a standard, that is built on primarily 2 things, Jamal. Toughness, work ethic and toughness. Toughness is a part of work ethic. You can't work harder than the majority of the people out there to become champions if you don't have the toughness to do it. And togetherness, team, the idea of playing as a team and playing for each other. So it's pretty simple. Those are the 2. Obviously a lot of other details go into that, but it comes down to primarily those 2 essential ingredients, and that's the toughness that's required in, because to be a championship program, you have to do hard things on such a consistent basis, and you have to get over that hump where it becomes where what used to feel like just so difficult becomes habit and even a joy. And I always, whenever I took over a program, I always took the long approach. So what I mean by that is, I was more interested in building a program, a championship program that could sustain itself for a long time versus taking shortcuts to try to win games quickly or early. So whenever I've taken over a program, and I've always taken over really difficult situations, or taken over programs that were about as close to the bottom as you could get, and instead of focusing on obviously you're always trying to win the next game, but I win as much as you can. But I thought it was important not to sacrifice the big picture just to get a win today. I always felt like sometimes to become really truly great and become dominating and a team that can get to the top and stay on top, sometimes there needs to be losses on the way and tough times during the process. And then what happens is once you do reach the top, you appreciate it so much more. And so those are some of the concepts that were always at the forefront of my thinking when figuring out how to. The only experience I've ever had is building. I've never had the opportunity to take over a program that was even on solid footing. I've always, in my 3 head coaching jobs, I always took over programs that were just in the toilet, to be honest with you. They were in really, really bad shape from a talent standpoint, number one, and from a culture, winning culture standpoint, number two. So, I was always thinking about the long term, and just basically trying to build our standards. And those are the 2 main ingredients: competitive toughness, which includes work ethic. A standout degree of work ethic, and then togetherness. Unselfishness, doing it with each other and for each other.
I think that's been one of my. I think that's where I know that, like I put on my post, who I am as a coach and how I've developed as a coach is I'm like you, because most of the programs I've taken over, I've gone into, they've been in the dumps for the last, however long it's been.
Yeah.
And I actually, like I tell people in the interview, I actually thrive on that situation. I like that because that now allows me to put my taste and my methods and my attitude and my identity on that program, and it's not somebody else's who already had it before me. Now it has to change to me, but it's all going to be me, but it's my players because they're working hard, because that's what I'm requiring of them. So I enjoy those situations.
Yeah. It's it's invigorating, and it makes it that much more gratifying when you do become champions, because you just know. I mean, everybody in the program knows I've got my fingerprints all over this. I didn't ride someone's coattails to this success. Me and my teammates and my coaches, we did this, and that's what it's all about. And there's always going to be a weeding out process along the way, because inevitably some people just aren't built for it. Some people they're better suited to go to a program where you just get along you don't. I've always wanted our teams to overachieve, no matter what level that would take us to. Some teams I've coached that didn't even have a winning season, much less win a championship. I've taken just as much or sometimes more pride in those ones as the championship teams, because I know to win to whatever level we found a way to win to, we overachieved, and that's what it's all about. And to overachieve, you got to have those 2 things. You got to have toughness about you, and you got to be better collectively as a team than you could have ever been as a collection of individuals. And I can, I'm proud to look back on teams I've had a chance to coach and know that, we did a lot of that. We did a lot of overachieving, even the ones that, didn't win championships.
So I have a question. This is a question I've always kind of wondered. It'll be a two-part question. How important are individual workouts to you? I know how important they were, and I know how much I developed as a player in the individual workouts, but how important are they? And then how did you base your individual workouts? Was it based on skill level, position, class, or, what was it based on?
Yeah, individual workouts are really important. I learned the importance of individual workouts when I started working for Coach Barnes at Providence. Back then, the rules were very different. And to be honest with you, the majority of programs across the country weren't doing individual workouts. There wasn't the emphasis on individual workouts that there is today. The rules have kind of pushed a lot of people along to having individual workouts now. But at Providence, we always carved out time within the rules to do individual workouts. And the reason is because at Providence, we couldn't compete with the Syracuses and Georgetowns and St. John's of the league in recruiting. I mean, we're not going to go head to head with those programs and win recruiting battles at little old Providence. So we were always getting players that weren't quite as talented coming in as the other teams in our league who we needed to beat. So our big thing at Providence was player development. We're going to help you pass those guys that were ahead of you in high school when we signed you. We're going to help you pass them by really working hard with you to develop your game. So that's where the importance of individual workouts first struck me. And I know it's hard to believe, Jamal, because you're not old enough to know this, but I'm telling you, the majority of the programs were not doing individual workouts back in those days. Wow. Now, they continue to be really, really important. Number one, the game has become even more skill intensive since those days. I mean, basketball skill, offensive skill of shooting and ball handling are more exposed. They're a more important part of the team's success today than they've ever been. So that's number one. Number two, individual workouts are also really, really important to relationships with your players. Because that time that you get a chance to, as assistant coaches and a head coach, to focus in on the selfish side of a player. And I say that warmly. I don't say that as to be derogative, but every player needs to have some selfishness from the standpoint of wanting to grow his game to the maximum level he can. And that's what those individual workouts are for. So you asked what was important about them. Well, it's easy. It's the offensive development. Your ability to handle the ball well and score the ball. So fundamentals like footwork, catching, passing on the move, and scoring and shooting is what we emphasize during those times. And when you can spend that intimate time with a player, just concentrating on his game versus what you spend, in practice, you're concentrating on the team's game. Those moments are really valuable towards your relationship that you develop with your players. So, and how do I approach them? Individually. I mean, every player has his own individual makeup of what he can do or what he needs to do to maximize his ability to impact the game. So if you have 15 players or 13 players, there's so obviously there's some overlap. There's some redundancy in terms of, all players need to work on this sort of skill to a certain degree, but then you also, every player has his own strengths and weaknesses. He has his strengths and his approach to the game that needs to be highlighted. You know, he needs to become great at it. And then he also has his weaknesses that will make all the difference in his performance. You know, a very simple example would be if a player is 99% of players coming into the major college level, they're one-footed players. In other words, they're comfortable and competent pivoting on one foot. For a right-hander, it's almost always the left foot. For a left-hander, it's almost always the right foot. Well, something as simple as becoming a two-footed player, a guy that is comfortable and competent pivoting on either foot, is important to every player becoming the best offensive player he can be. It doesn't matter if he's 7 foot or 5'7". So the way I approach individual workouts is I study each player's game, you know, along with our staff, and we figure out how we can make the best use of our time that we get with each guy individually and focus on the things that can make the most significant impact on his progress as a player. And, you know, sometimes some defensive stuff will get in there too. But it's all, I believe in tailoring it to each player, and it evolves. I mean, because as players improve in certain areas, then you move on to more, you know, to higher level stuff. So that's my approach. There's nothing, no rocket science to it. There's, like, you know, you have all these, you have this cottage industry that has really blown up in the last, you know, 10 plus years of workout coaches. And they have all these, they try to outdo each other with all the fancy drills of, you know, with all kinds of stuff. And you know, whenever you're in the gym working, it's always good time. But it really isn't that complicated, and it doesn't. It's just simply looking at a player's game, looking at the things that he could do in the game and things that held him back in a game environment, and attacking those things. And they're always basketball, just simple basketball things. You know, footwork, ball handling, perfecting and strengthening a certain move, adding a certain move to your game as a way to get yourself a good shot that you didn't have the year before, but me as your coach recognizes something you can be good at, like say an inside player. You know, one inside player might have the potential to be really explosive as a scorer with an inverse pivot development. And then there might be another inside player on your team who that you'd be wasting your time attacking that. You should be, you know, be more of a power post-up skill set oriented with him. That's just a real simplified example of how players at similar positions can be different in terms of what gives them the best chance to be the best player they can be as an individual player. And then when you add to guys' games and when you grow guys' skill set, you know, the next year, what might have been a travel last year is a bucket this year. And that makes a big difference, obviously, to that player, but also makes a big difference in your ability to win games.
Right. I know that we spend a lot of time with me trying to get that left foot pivot and then the right foot pivot. And then now when I have a kid that I've been working out, and he's going to Harvard University next year. And then I have a guy that's in my church. He's at Lenore Ryan. And I was working with him at the park a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, because he's a catch and shoot kind of guy. And I was like, so he has a bad habit of just hopping on the 2 feet. I said, nope. I said, if I'm guarding you and at where I'm at now, I can stay in front of you and I can recover if you hop. I said, but if you're going full speed and I'm going full speed to stay in front of you and you can go 1-2 or even, yeah. I said, now I'm going to be off balance. Your shot's going to be open and I got to hope you miss. And it took him a few minutes, but he caught on to it. And I was like, and he understood why I was teaching it to him. And same thing with my post player. He's like, why is your footwork so good? I said, because when I got to Western Kentucky, the first thing that we learned was footwork, pivoting. I mean, I was already good at footwork, but it increased in those individual workouts. And I've been able to show him different moves. And he's like, you got a lot of moves. I said, they're all pivots. I said, it's not anything I'm doing spectacular. I'm pivoting, and then it's a drop step or a spin, or it's a pivot, step through. It's all just in footwork. I said, if you look at guys in the NBA when they want to develop footwork, I said, a lot of them go see Akeem Olajuwon. I said, because he had some of the most immaculate footwork of a post player, like, or of anybody, period. But
he had the best, period.
Yeah, so, I mean, so Kobe went to see him. LeBron's going to see him. You know, Mike like everybody's going to see him, and it was just good.
Hey, you just mentioned something that can be a good teaching point here, Jamal. Like, so I think it's important for coaches to learn from players too, and coaches to stay flexible enough not to take anything away from their players. So I give you a good example that you just talked about. Patrick Sparks, who was a great player for us at Western Kentucky. After we left, he left and went on to Kentucky and had a terrific career in Kentucky.
Correct.
But at Western Kentucky, we were all about inside pivot foot, remember? And that means if you're moving to your right, pivoting on your left foot. If you're moving to your left, pivot on your right foot. Right. But Patrick, as you remember, Patrick was a highly skilled player coming to Western Kentucky.
Right.
And one of the things he loved hopping into shots. So like he would, for example, he'd make a hard cut off the baseline with his back to the rim and come off a pin down screen and catch it and shoot it, from three with great, quick release. And one of the ways that he did it is, he had grown up hopping into that shot. So I'll never forget, one day when we were really, really working on inside pivot foot and 1-2 step into offense, he asked me, he said, does that mean I'm not allowed to do my hop step anymore? And I said, oh, hell no. I mean, that's part of your game. You're great at it. I would never want to, take something away from you that you're great at. I just want to add the 1-2 step to it. So now you can do both. You can pivot off either foot and you still have your hop step, which you're so good at. And so that's an example of, sometimes I think coaches can be stubborn and too stuck in their ways, and it can negatively impact a player's game or even a team. So I think as a coach, we should always coach with an open mind. And I remember a year ago when I was still the head coach at Cleveland State. I remember that year learning some things from our players just by keeping an open mind. And, there have been times when a player has brought something to our program in his game that wasn't normally a part of my fundamental teaching package that I might add to our teaching package just because I saw how effective it was, for that player. So, none of us were, it's just like our fingerprints. We, our DNA, we all are a little different from each other. And that's what makes not only the game, but makes life interesting. And I think as a coach, you should always be open-minded and be willing to, we spend all our time teaching, but I think we're making a mistake if we don't always, keep our eyes open for learning opportunities as well.
Got you. But yeah, so I'm gonna get into some of our favorite part. It's probably about 2 more questions, Coach, and then whatever else we come into is kind of informal after that. I just got 2 questions. I know that because when I got to Cal State Fulton, people were like, "Why do you offensive rebound so hard?" I said, at Western Kentucky, we had this drill called Circle the Wagons. I said, I'll never forget that drill in my life. And the coaches asked me, he was like, well, tell us about the drill. I said, well, we put 5 on offense, 5 on defense. The circle, the part was the 5 on the outside was the wagon. The circle was the 5 on the inside. They were like, well, what were the rules to it? I said, there weren't any. They were like, huh?
The
I said, there
rule,
were
the
no
rule
rules.
was there are no rules.
There are no rules. They were like, are you serious? I said, yeah. I said, they said, well, wouldn't that cause fights? I said, yeah. I mean, it happened. I mean, it is what it is. Like, what championship team doesn't fight? Like, what, or get
Right.
it somewhere? I mean,
Yeah.
some teams had it day. And that takes me to my point of that one time we were at North Texas and we were supposed to only do circle wagons for like 10 minutes. And the whole rest of the shoot around was like canceled because we did circle the wagons for like 30 minutes. And
well, you remember what happened was we got out rebounded either the game before or the first time we played North Texas. I forget which one it was, but we had just got out rebounded the last game, or North Texas might have hurt us on the glass that game. And normally, shoot arounds were reserved for getting up some shots and walking through our defensive schemes and things like that. But that day we got taped and we went live, circle the wagons, and it was because of that. It was because we had faltered somewhere in rebounding. And again, you asked about championship culture. That's the sort of thing that goes into championship culture. We decided we were going to do something really hard, physical, and tough on game day, which most teams wouldn't do, wouldn't be willing, to do that on game day. But we had our standards, and rebounding, being a dominating rebounding team and certainly not ever letting anybody out rebound us was something that was really important to us. And so we did it. We crushed North Texas that night. So
we did.
Even though we beat each other up. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
They had a heck of a player.
So,
I think it was Chris Davis. What's his name? They had a 6'5" guard that was pretty good too.
Yeah.
But
they were really
talented.
Yeah. North Texas is always really talented.
Yeah.
So that's an example of building championship culture. Being willing, actually being enthusiastic about doing tough physical things, and without making excuses. And that's the reason why we were collecting rings in Western Kentucky, because we were willing to work harder than everybody else, and we knew it. There's the direct benefit of working hard. Obviously, you get better, you get tougher, you get stronger, and all those things. But there's an indirect benefit to it also, and that is nobody knows more than you. As each individual player and collectively as a team, nobody works as hard as you. So you go into games expecting to win because you feel like you deserve to win. It's this team that we happen to be playing tonight. There's no way they work as hard as us. There's no way they deserve victory as much as we do. And that's that indirect benefit to working so hard is it's every bit as important as the direct benefit of developing those championship habits on the court. It's a mentality, and as a player, you either have it or you grow it, or you just figure out this is not for me, because it's I'm not willing to work this hard. And when players haven't experienced championship level play much, there's some blind faith that goes into it, because you haven't had the experience of knowing that this is what happens. Now again, for a player like you who joined a program that was already dominant, at least you had that tradition to have some faith in. But for those guys, like you mentioned, David and Nate, and those guys that came in at the beginning, they had to do it on blind faith, and they had to do it through some losing to get to the winning part. And as like I said, you either have that makeup or you don't.
Coach, what is your defensive philosophy, and is the 1-3-1 that you have, because I love your 1-3-1. It's very unique and it's very effective, especially at the high school level, and it's effective at the college level because it was effective for us. It was effective for you at Georgia and other places. But what is your defensive philosophy?
Well, it's changed a lot since you played for me. Back then, we were very, very pressure oriented. So we were over the top aggressive. We wanted to apply as much pressure to the ball as we could without getting blown by, and we wanted to deny passes, all over the floor and make it difficult for you to even move the ball. Now, I've almost done a total 180. Obviously nothing's changed about, the importance of staying in front of you and allowing nothing but tough contested jump shot. But I've changed my approach to how to get there, especially a couple things. The game has changed. Players are just getting better and better. They're getting more and more explosive athletically to go by you and jump over you, and when they can get in the paint and that sort of thing. And the three-point shot. The three-point shot has changed defensive basketball every bit as much as it has changed offensive basketball. So because of all those things now, my philosophy is very contain-oriented. It's the opposite of pressure. Obviously, we want to put enough pressure on the ball to where it's not easy for you to see things and make good decisions and throw, pass for assists and that sort of thing, but not the over-the-top. Remember our goal back then defensively was to make the ball handler turn his back to the basket.
Right.
Make him so worried about protecting his ball from you that he couldn't face the basket. And then especially the biggest change is, one pass away instead of being up the line, on the line, denying everything one pass away. Now we're more about being in the gap. And so the guy with the ball literally has a wall of defenders in front of him with no gaps to drive. It just makes it easier for the ball defender to defend the ball, and makes it easier as a team for us to stay in front of you and make you take contested shots. And then, the big thing is, don't give up layups. Don't have bad fouls, and to keep people off the free throw line, and no open threes. And so I think the more conservative approach to staying in front, because the threes that go in most consistently are catch and shoot threes, open rhythm catch and shoot threes that are usually off of pull and kick plays. So if we can just stop the ball from ever getting into the paint by being a little more conservative on the ball and a lot more conservative one pass away, then it's just harder for the ball handler to drive and create help and create rotation. Because we want to be in rotation as little as possible to take away opportunities for those three kind of shots, dunks and layups, free throws, and threes. Now, the help side defense, that has changed very, very, very little. But we did some things at Fordham this year that were really good to us. And again, it's because of the three-point shot. So, if your listeners didn't know what you were talking about earlier when you were talking about the white line, all that is the midline, the line right down the middle of the court. That line is still the backbone to any defense that in my philosophy. And all it means is we always want to have 5 players on the ball side of the white line. And now, one thing we did differently at Fordham this year that was really good to us, and it was necessary because of the three-point shot, was, normally you'll have 2 guys on the white line because there'll be at least 2 players on the weak side of the floor. And, one will be lower, closer to the baseline. The other one will be higher, closer to the top of the key. And so one thing that we've done a little differently that's been really helpful is the high white line guy, his white line is the elbow. The lane line. So instead of straddling the midline right down the center of the court, we have him straddle the lane line so he can better defend skip passes. We were good enough at our help side defense at Fordham to where, and you remember this. Remember, we always talked about we knew we were playing our defense if teams were constantly throwing skip passes.
Yeah,
because that's the only thing that should be open. So we always said, if teams are throwing skip passes, that means we're doing everything right. But it's not easy. It's not easy to guard a skip pass. It's a long closeout, and because the three-point shot has gotten so much, people shoot it so much more aggressively and so much better. That's put even more pressure on that closeout on skip passes. So what we've done to defend against that is we'll have that high white line guy straddle the lane line instead of the midline, and so we have somebody that has a shorter closeout, to the skip pass. So those, and then rebounding is every bit as important to me as it has always been. Do you remember what second shots do?
They always go in.
That's right. See, Jamal, you were listening, man. You were listening.
They always go in.
That's what I say, right? Second shots go in. Second shots go in. That's why we can't give them up, and that's why we want them. And that's why you went to the offensive glass so hard, because you knew if I get it, I'm gonna score.
I'm gonna score if I get an offensive rebound. And you had a saying that if you go every single time, 60 to 70%, I think you said, the ball will just fall right in your hands.
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy getting offensive rebounds, but the key to it is to go every time.
Yeah.
Just go every time, and you're not gonna get it a lot of times, but the only way you're gonna get more than you're supposed to is by going.
Well, Coach, I mean, I really thank you for taking the time to talk to me live and share some of our fun stories and memories and talk to the world about some of your philosophies and the importance of a little bit of your journey and the importance of defense and our rebounding tactics that we used at Western Kentucky for sure. I really appreciate it.
Well, I've enjoyed it, Jamal. I've been walking around outside just trying to, enjoy the great weather. And here lately, this guy with the leaf blower has been following me. I'm trying to get away from him right now. But hopefully that wasn't too much of a distraction for you. And but I've enjoyed talking the game with you too, and reliving some of our experiences that you and I had together. You were. I'm always proud of you, and I'm proud of me with regards to you. And what I mean by that is, I thought you were one of those guys that I kind of found and evaluated and saw more in you than most coaches saw in you. And so I just thought, I thought you had something special, and it works out that you did. You had a college career that most players would be envious of, and it's not, and it wasn't easy. I mean, you earned your success. You fought through some adversity early in your career, and you toughed it out, and it all paid off for you. And even though I didn't get to coach you through some of your best years as you gained experience, because I left Western Kentucky and you left and went and did your thing out west. I was still, really, really proud of you and proud of the fact that you turned out to be, the player that I always saw in you when I first saw you in high school. So it's fun to relive some of that stuff.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.